BruCast is back, baby.
This BruCast episode is brought to you by the BruCast Store. Explore a store filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with BruCast. Embrace the shock, set the trend. Visit now bru-cast.com/store. Link below. Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to another BruCast episode. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rank the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast is recommended to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. BruCast is also on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where we upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now, BruCast on Instagram, X, and TikTok. All links on the description below. All right, so our guest today is Chet Galaska. How are you doing, Chet?
Doing well, Bruno. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much for being here. So this is a topic that the one we're going to discuss today that it's very personal to me. So, but as we agree, I'm going to start with one single big question, Chet. What is diabetes?
Diabetes is a disease that causes excess sugar to be in your bloodstream. Excess sugar is very damaging. Look at it this way. If you take a glass of water and you mix sugar into it, what happens to it? It gets sticky. Well, when you have excess sugar in your bloodstream, the same thing happens. The blood gets sticky and it causes plaque to build up on your blood vessels, and it damages just about every part of your body. You can go blind, you can have amputations, and a whole host of other problems. So having too much sugar in your blood is really a serious health problem. Now, diabetes is a little complicated to explain. There are two types of diabetes that I'll get into in a minute. But first, let me explain how normal bodies work for people who don't have diabetes. When you eat food, it gets digested into a sugar called glucose. The glucose goes into your bloodstream. It travels to every cell in your body and is used by the cells for energy. With people who don't have diabetes, their pancreas senses that there's glucose in the blood and it releases a hormone called insulin. Insulin's job is to be a key that goes along with the glucose, and it opens up the cell walls to allow the glucose to enter. So you have this amount of sugar in your blood, the insulin gets released, and then the sugar goes into the cells. So two things happen. Now, one is the cells use the glucose and burn it off, and the other is that the glucose leaves your bloodstream. So you've got this natural process that keeps the blood sugar in a healthy range. When you eat, before it gets put into the cells, your blood sugar is high, but then as soon as it leaves the bloodstream, it goes back down. So it's really a marvelous thing that happens. With diabetes, that process is short-circuited. There are two main types of diabetes. There's type 1, which I have. I've had it since 1981. In my case, I've got an autoimmune disease that causes my body to attack the pancreas's insulin-producing cells and kill them. So my pancreas doesn't produce enough insulin. It makes a very minuscule amount, but they get killed off. And so the amount of insulin my body produces practically is zero. Because I don't produce insulin, I have to take it by injection. You need it by injection because glucose breaks down in the body when it gets broken down into glucose. So we have to take it by injection. I do this several times a day, and I've had this since 1981. I've been doing it since that time, so I've had 43 years of experience doing it. So, I'm kind of living proof that if you know what you're doing, you can live long and healthy. So that's type 1. Type 2 is really what we think of when we think of diabetes, because between 90 and 95% of all diabetics have type 2. But type 2 is a different disease. It starts with a condition called insulin resistance. For reasons we don't understand, your body cells become resistant to insulin. And that means that in order for that glucose to leave the bloodstream, the pancreas has to produce more insulin. Eventually, and this usually takes a few years, the pancreas has worked overtime long enough that it starts to lose its capacity to produce insulin. So you're in sort of the same boat as a type 1 in that your pancreas can't produce enough insulin. And that's when diabetes is diagnosed. When your blood sugar level rises enough to be called diabetes, then that's the problem. So there you have it. We're probably going to spend most of our time talking about type 2 because that is what most people have. And it may be less well understood than type 1 is because type 1 is so straightforward. With type 1, your doctor can diagnose that, and the procedure is to put you on insulin. There's only one way to tackle that. With type 2s, there are a lot of different things to consider. So as we go on, we can talk about some of those things.
All right. So, well, I have several questions, but the first one I would say is like, what is the main difference between type 1 and type 2?
It's insulin resistance.
Resistant.
Type 1s, they can also have insulin resistance, but they're already treating themselves with insulin. So it's kind of baked into the cake. You're taking enough insulin to control your blood sugar for your particular body. By the way, diabetes is a very individualized disease. Scientists have said that it's so complicated and individualized that it could be that no two cases are exactly alike. So what works for me probably isn't going to work for you. You have to figure out how your body reacts to food and exercise, and it's different. So it's really important that the diabetic understand what he's up against so that you can, be aware of all these things.
So in both cases, the difference is the resistance, the insulin resistance. So I remember while watching your video that some people say there's the bad one and the good one, which
Yeah.
is crazy. But
Well, to me, it is crazy. The people, I think the reason they ask that is that they figure if you're having to take injections, then you have the bad kind. If you're able to control it with pills, then you have the good kind. But the fact is that they will both cause high blood sugars. And a well-controlled type 1, like I am, is in far better shape than a poorly controlled type 2. There are type 2s who walk around with extremely high blood sugars, and they will die from it. In fact, I was in the foundry business for 30 years. I was president of a company for 23 of those years. That was at a company that I co-founded with a partner. There was an employee that I had known for probably a good 25 or 30 years. And I just happened to speak to him by happenstance over the telephone a few years ago. It turned out that he had type 2 diabetes. And he told me that he didn't take care of it. And after a while, he couldn't stand the pain in his legs anymore. So he went to the hospital. They took one leg off on one day and the other one off on the next. And now he's bound to a wheelchair. He told me that if I ever got diabetes, to make sure I took care of it. So he had type 2. I mean, that's what happens. It doesn't matter what kind you have. The blood sugar is the problem. If you're letting your blood sugars run out of control for a long period of time, then this is what's going to happen.
Damn, both legs.
Yeah, that's quite a shocker. But you know what happens? The tissue dies because the circulation is bad in your legs and feet. The legs and feet are the furthest away from your heart. So the blood pressure down there is lower. So, that the blood just kind of, it can't circulate the way it should. And, the blood vessels die. And the next thing you know, you've got necrosis in your feet and legs. And there's nothing that can be done besides the amputation.
Yeah. So I'm aware of it because, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is a topic that is very, very close to me. Both of my grandparents, they had type 1, and one of them had to amputate both legs. Both of his legs were amputated, and I was like 8, 9. I had no idea what was going on, and I witnessed the whole process. and it was shocking, was traumatic, and yeah, I still carry that with me. So
Yeah, so the chances are he didn't live a whole lot longer after they took his legs. It's probably less than 5 years.
no, 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 no,
No, really?
no. I don't think he did. But uh, I don't want to compare, of course. But my grandfather also didn't took care of him. The one who got his legs amputated. He was eating ice cream all the time. I don't think he was taking any meds, like at least not seriously. And the
Yeah.
other and my other grandparent, I think lived like 20 years more, something like that, because he was, as you mentioned, like managing and taking care of it. I think he was taking injections because type 1, right? Type 1 is the one that
Yeah.
you normally need to take injections, all right?
Yeah, just to clarify, Bruno, type twos can also take insulin.
Oh, okay.
The type insulin resistance is progressive, and so it gets worse over time. And after a while, in many cases, the, the the oral medications don't work anymore, and insulin is required to control your blood sugar. So even type twos eventually may wind up taking insulin. But with type ones, insulin is it. It's the only way to fix it.
Um, when you say it's progressive, what exactly that means? And the reason why I ask that is because I see a lot of kids with diabetes. I mean, not a lot, but
Yeah.
sometimes I see kids with diabetes, and I wonder why.
Well, we really don't know,
Okay.
but it's certainly becoming more prevalent. Uh, I could, I have my own pet theories about why it happens, but I can't back it up with scientific, studies or anything. So I try not to speculate on things that may or may not be true. I really try to stick to the things I know to be a fact, because I'm really trying to get the facts out there. But we really don't know why kids get it. But what we've learned about diabetes is that years ago we used to call type 1 diabetes juvenile diabetes because it struck younger people mainly. And then we had type 2, which used to be called adult onset diabetes because it usually occurred later in life. But over the years, we figured out that anybody can get either type at any time. So instead of saying juvenile and adult, we now say type 1 and type 2. In my case, I got type 1 when I was 29. So if I wasn't a child, and I got it. So, uh, it doesn't respect age anymore.
When you
But
say
when you mention being progressive, uh, what happens is that the insulin resistance just gets worse and worse over time. As I mentioned earlier, it takes more and more insulin to overcome it. And that's something else we don't know. We know that it happens, but we really don't know why.
it is progressive, and one day it's just basically it snaps and you have it. Because
With
sorry, go
well,
ahead.
with type 2, it's a gradual process. You can have it for a long time and not even know that you have it.
Oh,
In
okay.
fact, the way that insulin resistance gets diagnosed is because of high blood sugar. When you get diagnosed with prediabetes, that means that you have insulin resistance. Unfortunately, there's no cheap test to do. There is a way to determine whether somebody's got insulin resistance before their blood sugars are high, but it's so expensive and difficult to do that it's just used for research purposes. So, the high blood sugar, that is the indication of insulin resistance.
Mm-hmm.
But when that, this is kind of a thing that needs to be clarified. When you talk about prediabetes and diabetes, people get the sense that they are different diseases, and they're not. Both of them start with insulin resistance. When you have prediabetes, it means that your blood sugar is high, but not high enough to be diagnosed as diabetes. As time goes on, especially if you don't watch what you eat and don't exercise, your sugar will get higher and higher. And when it gets to a certain threshold, that's when they say you have diabetes. But the terms diabetes and prediabetes are just benchmarks, they're not different diseases.
Got it. Got it. They are just benchmarks, and not different diseases. Okay. So basically, eating a whole pie during the weekend is not gonna help you.
Well, it's not going to help. But on the other hand, what causes the damage is chronically high blood sugars.
Chronic.
You, you know, you can, even in normal people, when you eat something sweet, your blood sugar goes up, and then the insulin comes into your bloodstream and it goes down. With diabetics, we don't have that luxury, so we have to do something if our blood sugar spikes. So if you want to eat that pie, uh, you look at it this way: you can eat the pie, and your blood sugar is going to spike. What do you do then? Well, one thing you can say is, well, this isn't going to kill me as long as I don't do this all the time. I can enjoy my dessert every once in a while. My blood sugar is going to spike. I'll get it down tomorrow. And as long as my blood sugar on the average remains low enough, there'll be no harm done. The other thing you can do is say, well, I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to drink a lot of water because moderate exercise will knock your blood sugar down. So if you eat that dessert and go for a walk for a while, you will find your blood sugar coming down, and then drinking a lot of fluids, things like water and non-sugar beverages will help your body flush that sugar out. So as a type 2, that's something you can do to get that blood sugar down. A lot of times people who don't understand diabetes will think that diabetic is being really irresponsible when they go to the Christmas party and that diabetic is eating some Christmas cookies. And this is kind of funny, but it really is not funny. There's a category of people in the diabetes world who are called the diabetes police. Generally, around the holidays, there'll be an article about how do you deal with diabetes police, because these are people who don't excuse me. The diabetes police are people who don't understand diabetes, but they think that eating sugar is poison for a diabetic. So when they see you eating a cookie, they figure you're being really irresponsible, and how dare you do that to yourself? And then they'll tell you about it. So that's something that happens. If you see a diabetic eating a cookie, you should understand the things that I just said. Number one, you can tolerate high blood sugars once in a while, and if you're going to go for a walk afterwards, you're probably going to burn it off anyway. So, the one of the problems with diabetes is that there's a stigma associated with it because people think that you brought it on yourself. They think you were fat or you were inactive or irresponsible by eating a lot of sugar. And in fact, none of those initiates diabetes. They don't cause the autoimmune disease in type 1, and they don't cause insulin resistance, but people think they do. So, people hear this all the time, and it's really easy to point the finger at a diabetic, especially one who's eating that Christmas cookie, and say, gee, look at that. Look what he's doing. It's no wonder he's in trouble, but we don't bring it on ourselves. Back before COVID, I developed a diabetes course, and I did it in a different way than the courses that are out there. I've taken a lot of courses that were developed by medical professionals, and with the courses they present, it's top-down stuff that misses a lot of the things that diabetics really need to know, which is the kind of things I'm talking to people like you about. Um, One of the best things that happened to me while I was giving those classes is that when I explained to people that diabetes starts when a genetic predisposition encounters an environmental trigger and that you are not responsible for having the disease, they feel much better about themselves. I've had people come up to me and say, the best thing you taught me is that I didn't bring this on myself, because they themselves figured, well, I'm overweight, so that's the reason I got it. But it's really not true. And it's a wonderful thing, Bruno, because when they tell me this, you can see the guilt just drip off their faces. They've been blaming themselves for this ever since they got it. And that is misplaced guilt. So, the more people learn the facts, the better they feel about themselves and the more effective they can be in dealing with it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, if you're born with it or it's just genetic, it's like there's nothing you can do about it. How are you gonna feel guilt or shame about something that like you were born with? Like you shouldn't.
Well, you shouldn't. And, that just we keep reinforcing this fact that the genetics has played such a big role. Uh, the University of Massachusetts just completed a study about a year ago, and they found that there are 117 genes that cause type 2 diabetes. This kind of gets back to what I said about it being highly individualized. That's a lot of different genes, and the genes interact in different ways. So that's a really complicating factor there. But I mean that is the way it is.
170 genes. I mean, I'm no biologist, but that sounds a lot.
Well, it is a lot. Think about the possibilities, Bruno. Take 117 genes, multiply that by 117, and how many different combinations do you have? That's a big number. So, even though we know what the genes are, we really don't know how they operate or what combinations operate. It's very complicated.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, the good thing is that people nowadays they can manage, right, with through
Yes.
exercise.
Yep.
There's a yeah.
Let me let me tell you one of the things that is very important. The easiest way to keep your blood sugar from being too high all the time is to not let the sugar get in the first place. That's where watching your food comes in. The main source of sugar is not just sugar per se, but carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are in lots of things. You can, you know, sweet foods like, sugars and cakes and ice cream and all that. I mean, we know that there's sugar in there, but other foods like bread or potato or peas, these are foods that are very high in carbohydrate. The thing that people need to understand about carbohydrate is that 1 gram of carbohydrate, meaning 1 gram of bread or potato or peas, will digest into 1 gram of sugar. So carbohydrates aren't just something else you have to look out for besides sugar. They are sugar. 1 gram equals 1 gram. So identifying the carbohydrates in your diet is critical. Usually, if you Google diabetes and food, and you'll come up with all kinds of things. Foods to avoid, foods to eat. There's lots of combinations out there. But one of the things that I've told people is that the only carbohydrates that really make a difference are the ones that you're actually eating. And when you look at your diet, it's probably not all that different from day to day. Your breakfasts are probably pretty much the same. Lunches are probably pretty much the same. Dinners will vary more, but over the course of a month, you probably repeat those recipes. So the universe of foods that you're really ingesting is not that great. So I tell people that what I do when I sit down to eat is I'll just look at my plate and I'll ask myself, where are the carbs? Is it in the bread? Is it in the pasta? Pasta is very high in carbs. Is it in the meat that I'm eating, the sausage I'm eating? Well, the answer is no. There are no carbs in sausage. So if you just look at the foods that you are actually eating, you can usually identify where the problematic foods are, and it's probably not even the biggest part of your diet. One person who took the class said her blood sugars were high all the time. They were way over 200, which is high. Normal is 70 to 130. If diabetics can keep theirs down in the around the 150s or so, that's considered very good control. For a diabetic to have a normal blood sugar is very difficult to achieve. But anyway, she was over 200. And it turned out that her husband worked the second shift. When he came home, he'd like to have dinner. She liked to have dinner with him. He liked pasta. So she was eating pasta every night before she went to bed. So what she was doing is eating a lot of carbohydrate, which raised her blood sugar, and then going to bed, which meant that she didn't have any physical activity to help moderate it. So I asked her just for the next week to stop eating the pasta at night and eat something that's low carb instead. So she did that, came back 7 days later and said that her blood sugars were around 100 every morning, which is really, really excellent. So in her case, it was pretty easy to identify the culprit in her diet. And other people will, you're going to eat different things, but once you understand where the carbohydrates are, you can do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the problem is that like most people, they don't even think about. They just, oh, I feel like eating bread today. Like there's no control whatsoever. Yeah.
Well, that's where managing diabetes is hard. I mean, this is really 24/7, 365. You get up in the morning, first question is, what's my blood sugar? Uh, and then if it's high, you do something to knock it down. If it's low, you eat something. Generally, well, in my case anyway, the blood sugars are pretty consistent in the morning. But here's another interesting thing. We talk about how complicated the food angle is. There are other things that go on too. There's a thing called the dawn effect, where even in normal people, your body is in a cycle and your body knows when you're going to wake up. So, in anticipation of that, it releases sugar from your liver. Your liver creates and stores sugar. And when it knows you're going to get up, it automatically boosts the sugar level in your bloodstream. And that's nothing you can control. You can be aware of it, but it's going to happen whether you try to do something about it or not. But the thing about the food is that you really do have to be aware of what you're eating. And, if you're hungry and your blood sugar is low, you can eat some carbohydrate. If you're hungry and your blood sugar is high, then eat some protein. You can eat some chicken or fish or whatever. Eggs are protein. They won't raise your blood sugar at all. I mean, there are things that you can eat that are not going to raise your blood sugar, but you have to be aware of those, and you have to know that you've got to make certain adjustments at certain times. And it's not like you can have a fixed schedule either, because certain things like stress, for example, if you're highly stressed, that'll raise your blood sugar. So, you need to make your food intake decisions based on what your body's actually experiencing, and not go by a schedule that says, well, okay, at 3 o'clock I can have a snack. Well, maybe today you can, maybe tomorrow you shouldn't. So you really don't know. It's something you've got to be keeping track of.
Damn. So you cannot even like have a routine and just follow this routine blindly, and you actually need to check your blood constantly and adapt every day.
That's the best thing to do.
Okay.
Now, with type 2, it's not as critical, especially early on, to check your blood sugar all the time, because you still have a lot of capacity left in your pancreas. You may have been diagnosed when you have already lost half its capacity, but that means that half of the capacity is still there. And if you start controlling the carbohydrate you're eating, that means that your pancreas doesn't have to produce as much insulin as it would if you ate a lot of carbohydrate. So by eating a lower carbohydrate diet, you're putting less stress on your pancreas, and you can keep that capacity going. The longer you do that, the better your body can still naturally keep your blood sugars lower.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I hear from opticians that if I use a certain type of glasses for long time, like long period of time, it will actually stop the my vision problems, or in some cases even revert the problem. And I can
Huh.
even see better. Like that's something they tell me. I heard that from different opticians. Is that something that's possible with diabetes? Like you always constantly monitoring, eating correctly, never having blood sugar spikes. Can you somehow revert the problem or cure it a little bit?
Well, the answer is no. And this is something else that people need to understand. We hear these terms cure and reversal thrown around with diabetes. And most of us, when we think of a cure, we think that you have tackled this disease and made it go away and it's not going to come back again. So you never have to deal with it. With diabetes, the definition is a little different. In fact, it's not a little different, it's a lot different. What it means is that you've brought your blood sugar down below a certain level for a certain amount of time. So if you've established a threshold of, say, 125, which is the 126 is actually where diabetes is diagnosed. If they say that if you brought your blood sugar down below 126 for a certain amount of time, maybe 3 months, then you have cured diabetes because your blood sugar is no longer at the diabetic level. But the reason your blood sugar was low is because you've watched your diet, you've exercised, and you've done all the things that you need to do to control your blood sugar. The minute you stop doing those things, your blood sugar is going to go right back up over 126. That'll happen in a heartbeat. So they make it sound by using the term cure that you don't have to worry about it anymore. But it's just it's not the case.
Oh man, there must be so many scammers out there. So I personally haven't looked at any of this, but just by saying the word cure, like you can sell so much fake stuff, right?
Well, yeah. In fact, I talked to a healthcare podcaster, believe it or not. She didn't let me on her show. She told me that she didn't know much about diabetes except that type 2 was more easily curable than type 1. And when I explained to her what the deal was, well, she didn't want me on the show anymore. But that's what she meant. You know, of course, if you're going to use that definition of cure, certainly, if you really watch yourself, you can bring that blood sugar down. That's but what that is, it's not a cure. It just means that you are being really, really successful in managing your diabetes. And I don't see why you would call it a cure. Just give the person a pat on the back for being knowledgeable and attentive enough to achieve that.
Hmm.
But that's why I'm out here, Bruno. There is so much misinformation out there that is so unfair to diabetics that we really got to educate people, and
Hmm.
not just diabetics. I mean, the whole society needs to get rid of all these misconceptions.
Yeah, and the stigma as well. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy. So, Chad, I wanted to ask you, how many times per day do you actually monitor your sugar blood levels in
Well, in my
average?
case, mine, I probably, well, here's the thing. You can monitor your blood sugar levels by doing a finger stick. That means you take a little blood sample out of your finger, then you put it into a testing device, and that'll tell you. When I was doing that, I would probably do it 4 or 5 times a day. But now I've got what's called a continual glucose monitor. The technology is marvelous. I installed this thing in my abdomen once every 10 days. It's just about painless to put in, and it will monitor and radio my blood sugar to a receiver I carry in my pocket. So to check my blood sugar today, all I have to do is pull that thing out of my pocket, push a button, and there it is. So, now I do it a lot. If I'm not feeling quite right, I'll pull it out and check it out. There have been times when my blood sugar has gone low, and I felt like maybe it was, but I wasn't sure. Just pull it out, and there it is. So these CGMs are becoming more and more common. A lot of type 2s are able to use them as well. And that's the best because if you get that real time information, that's the key to good control. As a little historical note, back in 1981, when I first was diagnosed with diabetes, the only way you had an indication of blood sugar was using a stuff called test tape. It was a yellow paper that came in a dispenser like a tape measure. And what you would do is pull out a little bit of this and you would dip it into a urine sample. If it stayed yellow, it means your blood sugar had been low. But if it turned various shades of green, it meant that it was high. I couldn't tell you how high, but it was higher. And then if it turned black, you knew that your blood sugar was really high, which was, that was good to know. But that was old information. That the urine was produced an hour ago. So it didn't tell you right now what your blood sugar is. It just gave you some kind of a rough guess. So then we graduated to the finger sticks, and that was really a breakthrough because you could know right away. but it was a pain because you had to take the blood sample and take out the meter, and use that. But today, this new technology is it's marvelous,
Wow,
marvelous.
so it's called contiguous glucose monitor, and so it's basically a belt that you have around your waist.
No, no, what it is, it's a little. The one I have is actually the old style. They made the stuff even smaller than what I've got. There's a monitor that's probably an inch and a half long, maybe 3/4 of an inch wide, that fits into a receptacle. There's an applicator that this thing comes in, and you just put it on your skin. You press a button, and it installs it. Under the skin, there's a little, I don't
Oh,
know how you call them. They're little fibers that go into your skin, and it doesn't go in deep. It monitors the interstitial fluids in your fat cells, and from that, they can tell you what your blood sugar is. So you put that on, and there you go. For 10 days, you don't have to touch it.
but after 10 days, you need to take it off to recharge, basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The thing only lasts for the 10 days, but you know, a minor inconvenience like that every 10 days is a whole lot better than drawing blood samples out of your fingers 4 times a day.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure.
It's night and day.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
I heard rumors. I don't think I don't know if it's real or not. That the next Apple Watch or the version after that one will be able to detect your blood sugar levels through your wrist. I'm sorry, without any incision, like extraction, like just by having a watch on. How realistic do you think this is?
I don't know. That's something that was something they've been working on for 20 years, where they wanted to be able to monitor your skin and get the blood sugar that way. That's I'm sure that's what you're talking about. But they never had luck with it. But maybe they did. I mean, it's like everything else. The stuff that we just talked about back in 1981. This was science fiction. This was stuff that people said, "Gee, maybe someday Buck Rogers will invent this thing, and it'll be so much better." But that wasn't even in the offing back then. Now, in the 90s, there was serious progress made.
Yeah.
So but this is another thing with diabetes. We know enough about it to know how to treat it well, but people have to know the facts, and they have to know how dangerous this thing is in order to take advantage of the things that are out there that let you control your blood sugar. I've had it for 43 years, and I'm still in good health. I've got some minor things, but nothing really serious at all. I know a woman who's had it for 65 years. She got it when she was 6. And she's been very fastidious about watching her food and doing all the right things. And she's doing well. You can do well with this, but you have to do the right things. And in order to do the right things, you have to know what they are. And the reasons are important. So it's really a crime that we have so many people like my former employee who lost both of his legs because he was completely inattentive about it. There's no reason for that.
I mean, it's a life choice, right?
It is. Well, it's a life, literally a life or death choice. Until 1925, when insulin was discovered and refined enough that you could use it in human beings, before 1925, diabetes was always a fatal disease, period. In fact, ancient doctors, diabetes has been around for a long time. The ancient Egyptians had records of people with diabetes. And right up until 1925, it was always fatal. In
Mhm.
fact, the way they would check for diabetes is medical people had people called water tasters who would just taste the urine of patients. And if they could taste sugar in there, I know it's a bad job, but if they could taste sugar in the urine, the doctor would give up because the doctor knew that if they had sugar in the urine, that they were going to die. So that's how serious this is.
It's crazy that after so many years we haven't invented a cure. I mean, I'm sure it will happen someday. But yeah, um, Chet, I wanted to ask you. So I know that diet chocolate exists. Is and as a kid, I had the understanding that diet food and diet chocolate they were for diabetics. Is that the case? And how much better is a diet chocolate compared to normal chocolate?
Well, you have to look at the nutrition label. Uh, Over in Europe, you probably have nutrition labels just like we do here, where they put on the product, how much sugar's in it, how much carbohydrate, various other things. You can look at that and it'll tell you right there what the carbohydrate content is. But it can be a little confusing because there is a form of carbohydrate that's listed in the total that does not raise your blood sugar. So you have to be a little careful about that. But generally, with those diet products, they do have less carbohydrate than the ones that are sweetened with sugar. So they're better for you. I don't think they were created just for diabetics. There's a
Okay.
huge market out there for people who don't want to eat a lot of carbohydrate. But, with this whole group of carb free products, this is a wonderful thing for diabetics. We can take advantage of them even if they weren't made specifically for us. Take sodas, for example. Well, what do you call soda in Europe? Like Coca Cola. Over here, we call it soda, we call it pop.
I would call it soda. I would call,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Well, uh, I know people who don't have diabetes who will drink 2 liters of sugar soda a day. It's just what they do. Now, if they become diabetic, the best thing they could do is stop drinking the sugar soda and go to the zero carb soda. That cuts out a ton of carbohydrate in one fell swoop. So these products are great that they're out there. Uh, Back in the early 80s, we didn't have as many of those products, but they were gaining popularity. So I had the benefit of being able to choose those things even back then. But that is a truly a valuable way to reduce your carbohydrate intake. And for many people, that may be the low hanging fruit. If you're drinking sugar soda, especially if you're drinking a few of them a day, and you cut that out, you're not going to raise your blood sugar that much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, low hanging fruit. That's the key word because that's something that I learned recently. Like everything that you do in life needs to be like step by step. I have this phrase that I use for everything, like baby steps. I baby steps, like for example, with the podcast, baby steps. I'm gonna start with a camera, and then maybe next month I buy a microphone, a little bit better. So you progress, but it's steadily, and you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Just yeah,
that's
yeah.
right. Baby steps.
Baby steps, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a good advice as well when it comes to food. But one thing that I'm sure not sure if you understand, does diet food still contains carbohydrate?
They do,
They do.
uh,
Okay,
but they'll contain fewer, and they may contain zero. You really have to look at the label.
got it.
Uh, but talking about how complicated diabetes is, here's another. This is a baseball analogy. A curveball. Does that mean anything to you?
No, I'm
Probably not.
sorry. No.
You're probably you're a football fan, not a soccer fan. So where soccer doesn't make let's see that's the American. To me, there's football, which is played with a pigskin here, and then there's soccer. Anyway, a curveball it just means that it's not a straight line. There's more to this than meets the eye. And one of the curveballs is that at least here in the states, that nutrition label has a 20% margin of error. So there's actually a 40% swing between what the actual carbohydrate content may be.
That's a
So,
lot. 20%.
well, but I'm sure that there's a reason for it. They probably can't control the manufacturing process well enough to make it better than that. But that's the thing, if you look at that carb content, it may or may not be what is actually on the package.
Hmm. Hmm. I see. Let's say, Chad, let's say that you take care of what you eat. You take care of the carbohydrates. You don't eat a lot of them. You manage, basically, you manage what you eat. You exercise regularly. Can, and you know that you have pre-diabetes. If you manage it, can you just stay with pre-diabetes your whole life, or no matter what you do, you're gonna develop diabetes?
People do that.
Okay.
They do that. They can do it just with diet and exercise. It takes a lot of willpower, but they do. And if you start doing the right things early on, while you still have a lot of capacity left in your pancreas, you can really reduce the strain on your pancreas and keep it going for your whole life. So, yeah, most people can't do that. Most people don't have that much willpower, but yeah, it can be done.
Well, the reason I'm asking you that is because I previously mentioned that my both of my grandparents had type 1. And I want to ask you, is it 100% of certainty that I will develop diabetes type
No,
1? No?
no,
Okay.
no, not at all. In fact, diabetes runs in my family, but you know, the, my brother has diabetes, um, type 1 also, and he and I have very, very similar traits. There's a 6 year difference between us, but we look the same, Um, but many other members of my family don't have diabetes. My great uncle had it, and that's a family that had, five siblings. So there are a lot of cousins involved, and it hasn't hit most of us. But because number one, you need the genetics, which just because you're a family member doesn't mean you necessarily have the same genetic makeup as each other. A lot of things will overlap, but it could be that the diabetes gene didn't get passed, from your parents to you. Um, I kind of lost my train of thought here. I'm sorry. Um, anyway, yeah, the chances are, I mean, you have to, number one, you have to have the genes, which you may or may not have. And then you've got to hit the environmental trigger, which we don't even know what they are. So you can go through life and not hit the trigger for you for diabetes. And the chances are with type 1, you probably won't. And type 2 as well.
Got it. But I mean, it's a gamble, right? If I know I could have diabetes in my blood, why would I gamble it? Why would I just eat nonsense for my whole life, not exercise? It's not a very good bet.
No, but you know what? Maybe you could use that as a motivation because
Yeah.
what we're asked to do as diabetics is really just eat a healthy diet and exercise. If you don't have diabetes, you're still going to be in better shape than if you didn't do those things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a win-win no matter what. If you do have it or it doesn't matter. If you're exercising well, I think that's a good recommendation for
Yeah.
everyone.
And here's another point that I'd like to make. Exercise really is important. As I mentioned earlier, that will drop your blood sugar. But it also prepares your body better. When you have more muscle, your muscle will either burn glucose from your bloodstream or it'll store it for future use. So having active muscle is really a big factor in controlling your blood sugar. The thing about exercise that is fascinating that I think many people don't understand is that we're not asking you to do vigorous exercise. In fact, we don't want you to work up a sweat or build huge muscles or go running a marathon or any of that heavy duty stuff. The best exercise actually is just moving. Things you do like walking up the stairs or playing with your kids or doing household chores or just going for a walk. These are the things that really are the most effective in reducing your blood sugar. The guidelines tell you that we should be doing that for 150 minutes a week, but it's cumulative. You can do it 5 minutes at a time. As long as it hits the 150 at the end of the week, you're in pretty good shape. And you know what? If you're just living life, you should be able to hit that 150 without much of a problem. what you have to do is anything besides just sitting in a chair or lying on a sofa all the time.
That sounds manageable. I mean, yeah, you can do it.
It is.
Yeah, because when you say like when we were talking before earlier in the podcast, we need to exercise. It's important to exercise. The mental image that I have is like a bodybuilder, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not. Yeah, it's not. As a matter of fact, the definition that I use size, and this, I didn't make this up, I read this somewhere, is that it's anything that makes your skeleton move. So that means that even people who aren't able to walk, at least not walk well, they can do chair exercises while they're watching television. You can, there are all kinds of chair exercise programs out there. And if you just did it during the commercials on TV, you would get your 150 minutes in no time, because it's not like it has to be your legs or it has to be your arms. Just your arms moving actively does the same thing. It helps build muscle and keep it active.
All
So
right.
they're not impossible things to do.
Do you have a exercise routine, Chad?
I usually go for a walk most days. I live in a nice neighborhood. There's a park right here, so I'll go for a walk. Uh, in the wintertime, I go to the YMCA, which is a gym. So I'll go there and then I'll do some weight exercises, but I do a lot of cardio. I'll do a cross trainer uh, or other machines. So I do, but when I go there, I will do a fairly heavy workout just because I enjoy doing it and I feel good when I do it. It really gets the blood moving and I feel better after doing that. But I don't have to. I could go there and do a very moderate exercise, like walking on a treadmill for a certain amount of time, and that would have a big effect. So, yeah, I do exercise, and I've exercised for my whole life. Of course, I've had diabetes for most of my life now, but I think that just liking to do it is a big benefit in my case because the exercise alone helps with avoiding plaque buildup in your bloodstream. Just the physical movement of the blood going through your system helps keep that stuff from building up on the walls. So I think because I've been doing that all the time for years and years, my system's built up pretty well. So I think that's a real advantage.
How old are you, Chad?
72.
You look great.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
I feel great. I do, but you know what? And you know what? I'm not an exercise fanatic. If I stood up, you'd probably see that maybe I look a little bit older standing up than I do sitting down. But you don't have to be buff. Really, the key is keeping your heart and your circulatory system in good shape, and that's why exercise is so important.
Got it. Whew, I feel so much lighter now talking to you. I came to this episode with a lot of thoughts in my mind. I have my grandparents have type 1. I gonna die. I haven't. It's the bad type, but no, like it's manageable. It's just it depends a lot on willpower. I might not even have it, and so a lot of good information today.
Well,
Thanks.
Bruno, this is the reaction I get every time I'm on a podcast because podcasters are just regular people. You pretty much know things about diabetes that everybody else knows. And a lot of what you know just isn't right. Just by explaining it to you gives you a whole different level of information and knowledge. And that's what we all need. I hope, sometime if you have a friend who's concerned about it just like you are, tell them what I said. Actually, the reason I'm doing these is to change. I mean, that this sounds pretty highfalutin, but I really am trying to change the world. My goal is to create an informed society that respects diabetics who fight the disease and encourages those who don't to take it seriously. I'm hoping to do that just by sharing these basic facts that people don't know. I think you already know that dealing with diabetes is a little more complicated than you thought it was, and that people who do these things do deserve respect. There is a lot to it. At the same time, there are an awful lot of people out there who don't take care of their disease because they don't know. That's why we need to encourage people who don't take care of it to take it seriously.
Hmm. Yeah, it's the work you're doing. It's super important. It's like you want to change the world. Like you're doing it one podcast at a time, one person at a time. It's that's how it's done, and it's a noble goal. So thank you for
You know,
doing it.
well, I enjoy doing it. Uh, One of the things that is it's really my dream is that I created a couple of short videos over the past year. So you saw one of them, and my hope is that these short videos are both under 25 minutes long, can be used by groups, whether it's a church group or a civic group or a book club or whatever it might be, that people would take an hour, spend the first half of the hour watching the videos, and then take the second half hour and talk about it. And you can pretty much emulate the kind of groups that I had before COVID when I was doing these classes in person. What you find is that after people watch the video and they talk about their own personal stories, that you get more information about it and you get some real feedback as to how dangerous this disease can be and how successful people can be in treating it. So, my goal is that hopefully a club will get the videos, have a program like this, and spread the word.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully, I mean, just for our audience to know. So I'm sharing the screen right now. With your website is the videos page. So Chet has one, two, three videos on right now on his website. I watched one of them, which is called "The Confusing World of Diabetes," and it's 24 minutes long. This one that I watched, and was very well explained, very detailed. So I imagine the other ones fall under the same category. Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Well, I appreciate your showing this, Bruno. I think, in fact, I don't think I know that when people see these, they'll get good practical information that is actionable, and that's a big part of what I'm doing. It just came to my mind that normally here in America, I tell a baseball story. You didn't know what a curveball was, so you probably don't know much about baseball.
No, I'm sorry.
Well, baseball is played on it's played on a big field, but the main playing surface is a square. It's got four bases to it, and the object is for the pitcher stands in the middle of the square, and he'll throw a baseball to a guy who's got a bat. It's essentially a big stick in his hand, and the batter's job is to hit that ball so that nobody can catch it. That's really terribly oversimplified. But anyway, it's very hard to do. Baseball is very popular here. When they're playing baseball, the object is to get. I'm trying to simplify this, man, and I can't do it. Let's put it this way. Uh, this guy's name was Ron Santo. He was a very good baseball player back in the 1960s. He had type 1 diabetes. He was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame during a week when I was in Chicago. And there were stories about him, and one of them had to do with his diabetes. He kept it a secret because he was afraid that the ball club would fire him if they found out that he had it. So he's in a game. It's a very tight game. And he's going to be the next guy who's going to be the batter. The situation is such that if the batter if the batter doesn't succeed in hitting the ball, then the side retires, meaning that the game is over. So it is a very critical situation. Santo felt the symptoms of low blood sugar coming on. I got to explain what that means. With people who use insulin or certain type 2 medications, you can have very low blood sugar. We know that high blood sugar is what causes the long term damage, but low blood sugar is a problem too. The reason is that your brain, unlike other tissues in the body, doesn't store glucose. It takes it directly from the blood. So when there isn't enough glucose in the blood, the brain is starved. And things start happening. You can start sweating. You lose your coordination to where if it gets low enough, you can pass out. Your eyesight can get funky to where you're seeing double or triple. Well, Santo feels is coming on, and he just prays that the guy at the plate will make it out to retire the side and let him go back to the dugout to eat a candy bar to raise his blood sugar up. Well, instead, the guy doesn't make it out. He winds up getting on base. So Santo walked up and he said he looked up to see there were three pitchers. The pitcher is the guy who throws the ball. There are three pitchers. There are a whole bunch of people standing out in the field. There are three scoreboards because he's seeing triple. So the pitcher threw the ball and it looked like it had a slinky attached to the back of it. You know what? You must have slinkies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. It looked like it had a slinky attached to the back of it. So he took a wild swing and put it out of the ballpark, which meant that he won the game. He got back to the dugout in time to eat his candy bar, and nobody knew that story for 10 years because he kept it a secret. So it's an exciting story. If you were a baseball fan, you would understand how amazing this was. But what he did by hitting that ball was, excuse me.
I know the term home run. I hear that all the time. So when the ball get out of the stadium, it goes so far, basically, right?
That's what he did. He hit a
Okay.
home run, but it's a special home run. It's called a walk-off grand slam home run. So number one, there were three people on base. So by hitting that one home run, normally a home run's one run, but he hit that. So there's three guys on base and himself. So the team got four runs out of it instead of just the one. And by walk off, it meant that because he hit that, the game was over. So you walked off the field after he hit it. So it was a walk off grand slam home run, which is an amazing feat. But the way I looked at it is that the real drama was what was going on in his head when he knew his blood sugar was going low and he had a good chance of passing out in front of all those fans. And then his secret would have been open.
My
So,
gosh.
so when I came home, I started telling that story, and people were amazed by the story. But I discovered that people really don't understand diabetes well at all. But what was even more amazing was that people asked me about type 2. I could talk about type 1 because I had it for all those years. But when they asked me about type 2, I discovered that what I believed about type 2 was largely wrong. And I figured, well, somebody like me has it all wrong, then our whole society has got a real problem with this because this misinformation is so common and so thoroughly believed that it's unfair. It causes a stigma, it causes people not to talk about diabetes, not to get treatment for it. And there's a lot of bad that comes with this information.
So what did you got wrong about type 2?
Sorry.
What
Oh,
did
what
you?
did I have wrong?
Yeah.
I like most people, Bruno. I believe that people got it because they were overweight. In fact, my kids would ask me about type 2, and I'd tell them, all they got to do is lose some weight, and it goes away. Well, that is totally not true. But that's typically what people think. People also think that you ate too much sugar, and that's what causes it. But that's not true either. Controlling your weight and controlling your sugar intake are certainly parts of dealing with diabetes, but they don't initiate it.
What initiates is your genetic predisposition, basically.
Yep.
Oh, got it. Yeah. You see, that's also something that I didn't know since at all. Like I also had this misconception, Chet.
Well, it's so common, Bruno. That's the thing. That's why I enjoy doing these podcasts because almost always people are enlightened.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'll get somebody who gets it, and that's kind of a breath of fresh air because you know they we can talk about this and reinforce what each other is saying, but that is not the norm. Almost everybody is like you. And they're also like you in the sense that they're curious enough to find out what's going on. And I really appreciate that.
Hmm. That's so interesting. I was studying. I really like psychology as well, and I was reading a book about another very light topic, borderline personality disorder. So it's not light at all. And similar to diabetes, I thought I had this misconception that the person was just born with it, but actually no. There's also like they have a genetic predisposition, and at some point in their life, normally during their childhood, there's a trigger that triggers the borderline personality disorder. So I can see some similarities here with diabetes.
You know what? There's a lot of that. I just heard a big story about cancer, and there was one gene, at least one gene that they have found that runs in families, and there's a huge preponderance of cancer in those families. So
Really?
I don't know how recent that is. The article I just read that, but I don't know how long that research has been out there. But
Hmm.
yeah, the genetics has a lot to do with a lot of things.
And it's important not to feel guilty about it, because as we talked earlier, like you're just born with it, so why have a stigma or shame about it? Like you have it got triggered somehow, just seek knowledge and try to deal with it. I think that's the
Exactly.
best attitude, the best mindset, because the alternative, well, that's not nice. Just give up, be a victim. Like, what are you gonna achieve with that?
Well, that's the thing. You
Yeah,
know, it's but you're right. You know, if you have something that you didn't ask for, you shouldn't be walking around feeling guilty about it.
yeah. So Chad, I wanted to ask why you were talking about the baseball player, right? That
Yeah.
he was having the symptoms. He was having the symptoms about from low blood sugar. So a lot of sweats, like the eyesight was not that good. So um, we covered low. So let me formulate my question. I'm sorry. I'm excited. Uh, so there's low blood sugar symptoms. My question would be: are there any high blood sugar symptoms?
Yeah. You feel really run down. You don't have energy. You're going to be very thirsty. You're going to be urinating a lot because when your body has high blood sugars, it knows it's got to get rid of them. So the way it does that is by filtering it through the kidneys and trying to expel the sugar that way. But in order to do it well enough, you need to drink a lot of fluids. It takes a while to get it down, but that will help get it down. So you have, that terrible thirst. Before I got diagnosed, I was visiting a customer and I was thirsty. So I went to a convenience store and I bought some orange juice. So I drank the orange juice and I went into this meeting and I could barely talk. I was so dry, I couldn't even talk. But I thought this is unusual, but it'll pass. A few weeks later, I went to a Blue Cross place on business and I picked up a brochure about diabetes and I had all the symptoms except the ones that applied to women. So I knew that's what I had. And then the thirst became uh, that was understandable at that point because that's what my body was trying to do. As soon as I drank something, it would go right through my body and just ask for more. And when I drank the orange juice has a lot of sugar. So I wasn't helping the situation. I just made it extremely bad. I mean, that's why I was so dry. So that's the kind of thing that can happen with high blood sugar. You'll feel it. On the other hand, if you're a person who hasn't taken care of the diabetes and they just get used to this as being the baseline way they feel, they may figure, well, that's just the way life is. That's the way I feel all the time, and not realize it's because of the high blood sugar. But if your blood sugar is usually well controlled and it gets high, you'll notice it.
Hmm. Beer as well contains also a lot of sugar, right? Because of the glucose. It sorry, the carbohydrate that becomes sugar.
Well, here's the thing about alcohol. Alcohol actually lowers the blood sugar.
What?
Yeah, the alcohol does, but with American beers are light. I've been to Germany, and I love German beers.
Thank you.
But German beer does have more carbohydrate than American beer does. So it really depends on what you're drinking. Um, but yeah, the alcohol itself, if you just drank alcohol, it would lower your blood sugar. And for anybody listening, don't get the idea that I'm telling you that drinking pure alcohol is a strategy for lowering blood sugar. But the fact is that it depends on the particular beer you're drinking.
All right. So
That's good news, huh, Bruno?
I'm happy. Wow, I didn't know that. I always heard the opposite, like beer like gives belly fat and has a lot of sugar in it. Because there's the like the common term like belly how do you call it? The beer belly, right?
Beer buddy?
Yeah, have you heard about that before? That's something that I heard before. Like when you really drink a lot of beer, like you have all that fat that stores in your belly. Like
Oh, beer body.
oh, beer
Oh,
body.
beer belly.
Yeah, exactly.
Beer belly. Yeah, yeah. Well, I think there's a connection there.
Talking about fat, I remember during the video that you shared with me, there's different types of fat, right? There's the subcutaneous fat, and
Yeah, this is something else that's misunderstood. Your body has basically two different kinds of fat. There's subcutaneous fat, which is the soft, squishy stuff that's right under the skin. That's normally what we think of when we think of fat. But there's another kind of fat called visceral fat, and that's a hard fat that's packed internally around your organs.
Oof.
Visceral fat makes insulin resistance worse. So that's why it's a factor in type 2 diabetes. The more visceral fat you have, the worse your insulin resistance is going to be. Typically, we're told that if we lose 5 to 7% of our body weight, it'll have an impact on diabetes. And the reason that's true is that when you lose fat, the first fat that goes is the visceral fat. So by losing that first amount of weight, you can improve your insulin resistance.
So if the first fat that you lose is the visceral fat, does it mean that when you gain fat, it also gain visceral fat first?
Interesting question. I would assume so, but I don't know that.
All right.
I would assume so.
Have you heard about any studies regarding fasting and if this is any beneficial for diabetics?
No, I haven't. But I can tell you this: bodies need nutrition, and if you're going to be, yeah, the thing to do is talk to a nutritionist about that because I really don't know. But it does seem to me that you're going to have to eat enough to keep your body healthy, and by fasting abnormally, it can't be good for you. I mean, we have these bulimia and things like that where it becomes a disease where people just lose too much weight. But yeah, I'm going to defer from that, Bruno. I really do just try to share things I know for sure.
That's perfect. That's the good approach. I also have no idea. I have a friend who fasts, and I think he goes. Once he went like 2 days without eating, and he was like, "That's the way to go, and you just feel so much better, and it's good for your body because when you don't eat, it triggers the longevity genes." I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. Well, he might feel better just because maybe he's lost a little bit of weight. When you lose weight, you do feel better. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, what we do know is that the diabetic who knows the most lives the longest. That's something that you shared with us in the video. Was like that's perfect.
There really is perfect, and there is a lot of truth to that. I think I've shared enough today for you to realize how complicated this is.
No,
And there's a lot for you to know. You've got to be able to identify carbohydrates, look at your own meals, and figure out what you're going to eat, what you're not going to eat, uh, do the exercise, and an awful lot to learn about diabetes. And the more you know, the better you can fine tune what you're doing.
for sure. And you're helping spreading the message. And what about we share your website, Chet, with the audience?
Sure. It's simple. It's www.challengediabetes.us. The US obviously stands for United States most of the time, but I chose it because my program really is about us. It's about all of us. And I just thought that was a telling little thing to put in there. So it's not .com, it's challengediabetes.us. And the videos are available as well as the books that I've written. But I've kept the videos reasonably priced so that if you have a group, it's not going to cost you more than 50 cents or $1 to look at these things. I wish I could give them away for free, but I've got expenses in doing this, and that's just a way to defray them. But I really believe, and I know from personal experience in sharing this information with, excuse me, lots of people, that it is powerful. So I hope you'll take advantage of it.
For sure. I hope so too. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, Chad? Any last remarks?
I'd just like to share that I have a very good friend, lives 2 houses down from me. He's from Germany. He's a great guy. And we get together every once in a while. It's him. There's another German guy who ran the German Cultural Center in Chicago for many years. He retired out of that. Then there's another guy who was a military person in Washington. And the four of us get together every once in a while to talk about politics. We disagree, but, but we have the best time because nobody takes it personal. We have a rational discussion about all kinds of things. And with these two German guys, it's an added treat that they are German and they have a background that's totally different from me and the other guy. And the insights that I get from uh, about Germany from them are really nice to hear. So it's just a tip of my hat to Germans in Germany. Uh, Even though I understand, even though you speak like a German, that's not where you're from. but anyway, it's just a wonderful thing that I'm privileged to be a part of.
That's nice. I personally live in Germany for how many years now? 7, 8 years, and I can't get my hand around the politics. I had, you know what's even crazy? I had the chance to see Merkel, our previous
Yeah,
chancellor, like 3 times randomly by like completely like I'm not even joking, Chad. It was like because I lived in Berlin for I don't know 3 years, and then once I was visiting the parliament, she was there. I was like, okay, that's
yeah,
that's funny. And then I was like in a game convention once. She was also there, like completely random. So I don't know why I kept bumping to her like all those years, but I
yeah,
it's funny because I don't know anything about German politics. So
yeah. That is funny.
yeah, yeah. All right, Chat. So thank you very much. Was like really, really knowledgeable. I really like how grounded you are and how you really stick to the facts. That's really good.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everyone. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to rank the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast will recommend it to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. BruCast Check out now the BruCast store, explore our store filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with BruCast. Embrace the shock, set the trend. Buy now at brew-cast.com/store. I repeat, brew-cast.com/store. Links on the description below. BruCast is also on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where we upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now BruCast on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Links on the description below. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, chat. It was an honor. See you next time. Bye-bye. All right.